Right, so we're just ready to start. I guess with the gavel in. Are we recording?
We're recording.
Good morning. This is the September 20th meeting of the Assembly Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee. And first thing we'll do is take the roll. Mr. Croft.
Eric Croft on the assembly.
Bill Palsy, the municipal manager.
Dick Train, Assembly.
Christopher Constant, Assembly.
Austin Quinn Davidson, Assembly. Amy Domboski.
Forrest Nunbar.
And might as well go around the room.
Oh, Julie Haskett from Chugach Electric.
Lee Fiebert with Chugach Electric.
Nolan Claudio, Budget Advisory Commission. Mark Johnston, MLB.
Eugene Colhaden, Observer.
Trustee Badak.
Sharon Schmarm, the Vice Chair of the Municipal Reporting Commission.
And Jamie Patterson Sims, Chair of the Municipal Airport Advisory Commission.
Marilyn Alvarado, Governor Officer.
Kristen Smith, Mayor's Office.
And Ralph Gibbs. Thank you. All right, so on the agenda we have two items today. Discussion of the update on the MLNP sale and then a confirmation hearing for Mr. Gibbs. So first, let's take up the MLNP sale discussion. And we do have a draft resolution in response to the Chugach Electric resolution. But before we enter that discussion, I think what's become custom is we've had a quick briefing from Chugach and from the municipality. So why don't we start there? Lee.
Well, thanks for inviting us again, and welcome to your new assembly member. My name is Lee Fiebert with Chugach. I'm the CEO of Chugach. We feel very good about where we're at with the sale. We've done a lot of work. We've had a lot of consultants working with us. So we've been doing our due diligence efforts. I think those are just about complete. We should have reports in on Monday to finalize that. So we're well along the way. We've done the financial review. We've done all the integration studies on what they call the day one target operating model. And so we figured out basically how we take all the employees at MLP, bring them into Chugach, and how best to operate going forward, and then what the synergies are with the two organizations and so forth. So we feel very good about where we're at with the overall financials. We do have a board meeting on the 27th next Thursday, which we will present all this information to the Chugach board. And I think at that point we should be in pretty good shape. We've reviewed basically the term sheet agreement that we've been working on with the MOA. So we are ready to go. We have, our intent is, as we told you before, is to have the asset purchase agreement approved at our October 24th board meeting. We do have a board committee meeting on October 10th. So if we have any last minute things that we need to work on, it'll be kind of the preparatory to the 24th. So we hope to have the signed asset purchase agreement by the 17th, which gives us at least a week, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more time to actually do the review. But we feel in very good position to make sure that we get this done by the 24th, which I think was the assembly would like to have this as well, so we can do public process in November and then move on to final assembly approval in December. So we're feeling very good about where we're at. We're still very excited about the transaction. We think it's good for, again, it's good for the community, it's good for our ratepayers, our members, and it'll be good for our employees long term. So I think it's been a good experience for us, and we look forward to working and getting the final agreements worked out in the next couple weeks.
Perfect. So a few questions. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should mention I'm feeling well under the weather, which is why I'm down here, not because
You can move a little bit.
So,
Inside the door.
This resolution that we have before us, is this something that you requested of us, or is this something that?
No, so we'll get to that after this discussion, but the resolution is in response to the resolution that came from their board.
Okay.
So it's our communication back to them. We heard you and we're in agreement.
Okay.
Sorry for the spelling.
One little thing on here, and I guess I just So I work for GH Native Corporation, we spell it without an I.
That's an error, and I don't know how that got in there, because it wasn't there before, and I apologize. But we'll come back to that conversation after the briefing,
I was
so.
just gonna ask him if they just.
We didn't change it, so.
Yeah, no, that's an error. It will be fixed before introduction. So then, Mr. Trainee?
Have you gone through the buildings yet? Because there, you said at the beginning there are some buildings you don't need. Are you able to tell us yet what buildings you don't need?
Well, we did a final review last week. We did get the appraisals in, so now it's trying to determine what facilities will need long-term. I think what our goal is to move everybody within 5 years to our facilities out on International Airport Road. And so that would mean everything would be surplus down on the First Avenue area. But I think we need a 3 to 5 year timeline to do that transition. What we haven't figured out at this point, are we better off leasing for 3 to 5 years, or should we just purchase it and sell it later? But I think ultimately we believe that a majority of those facilities would be surplus. We haven't gone through it on every building and made that final decision as of yet, but that's kind of the leaning right now.
Okay. Because we're still looking for buildings for evidence storage, so if you've got big buildings you're not going to use, we'd like to know about it. So we can talk to administration about it.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a transition for you to say, okay, this building will probably be vacated first, and this might be the last one.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dabowski?
Mr. Trainee has my question.
Okay. Other questions, anyone?
I'm worried now.
Okay. So, sounds like rainbows and unicorns. I'm waiting for the road bumps. So, maybe that'll be when we get it and have our conversation. But, Mr. Palsy, how about you take a stab and tell us from your perspective where we are and where we're going?
Rainbows, unicorns, leprechauns, and teddy bears. I think we, candidly, there were a few times we did this update, we thought we were making slower progress than we otherwise would like. I think we're past that. I feel like we're off at a sprint now, and we are equally optimistic. We're now in the throes of exchanging red lines of the 85-page asset purchase agreement. We still are working on details, like which buildings Chugach might not want to take, but we have the framework set up for how to handle that. We know how the price might be offset, how we'll account for that in the books. And I think, by way of preview, we've also listened to the Assembly's guidance on how to find a way for this transaction to make sense for not just Chugach and MLP ratepayers, but also MEA ratepayers. I think we're going to have something to tell you when we finally emerge on that front too. So I think we're feeling pretty good. We are off to the races. We are having now multi-hour-long phone calls with our outside counsel in Seattle. That's what Becky did yesterday, and we'll be doing again today. But we feel pretty good about where we're at.
Questions?
Question, what time frame do you see this coming from the Assembly?
Well, we know that there's a keen interest in this October 24th date, so we are doing our level best to make that October timeline.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? My only question is to either of you or both of you, do you see any hazards for us in the future that we need to be paying attention to in the near term, midterm?
I'm not sure yet. No, I think we'll.
I think the biggest thing is just, sitting down and getting the asset purchase agreement done, and it's just the timeline, making sure all the consultants and everybody is working as quick as we can. So.
Mr. Dunbar?
And Amy.
This is a question I could have, perhaps should have asked much earlier in the process. But is there any way for us to see sort of real-time draft of that, or is that, you think, would that be too harmful to put into the public space as negotiations are ongoing? But October 24th, it's really not a long time between October 24th and December 31st. And we're going to have to engage the public during that time. And if there are particular things we think the public is going to get hung up on, I would like us to be able to start a discussion earlier. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Through the chair, I think my view would be that it's not going to be ready for prime time until it's ready for prime time. So rather than to introduce drafts which are unfinished or we haven't signed, and possibly get everybody spun up on an issue that's going to disappear anyway, we'll do our level best to get it finished and then bring it to the public as soon as we can.
And I would just offer that once we get closer to the 24th, we have already stated the intention to meet bi-weekly and have multiple meeting discussions on the topics that come up so that we are able to vet it thoroughly and at the same time in line with their timelines.
Can I ask a follow-up to that then, of you, Mr. Falsey? So we have, I'm trying to think, during the negotiations, or I should say during the litigation over the port, we have entered executive session a couple of times to discuss what are very high dollar negotiations essentially. Do you see a time when that would be appropriate on this, prior to the final draft coming forward from the public? I mean, we are sort of conduits for our constituents, and I am a little concerned that you are negotiating with Chugach, and you certainly have the municipality's best interests at heart, but there might be unique concerns from any of our districts, particularly I think Mr. Constance's district or my district, that have a lot of MLMP in them, that we might want to share or discuss with you.
I'd say through the chair, thinking back in the muni attorney days and going through the checklist of what we can talk about in executive session, I don't think an executive session would be appropriate for you to bring constituent concerns to us. It potentially could be appropriate for us to reveal something that could be immediate knowledge of which could affect the finance of the municipality. I don't see anything like that we would need to have an executive session for us to convey anything to you. But certainly if there are particularized constituent concerns, we would be happy to receive them and include them in our thinking. I don't know that we have surfaced anything of that flavor yet, because as we told the voters, this will only go through if it is a good deal for everybody. So there's nobody who is sort of in a special bucket that's sort of to be sacrificed for the greater good of the rest of the transaction. Everybody's going to be better off here. And the RCA is going to require that, approve it.
I guess I'm just a little concerned that, we don't know what we don't know, right? And I largely trust you, but I think I do.
Even
I
the
do
side
trust
for
you
it,
personally,
say that.
but the assembly members, maybe we have the ability to issue spots sometimes, things that the administration might not, and I am a little worried that we are not going to have something before us until relatively late in the game.
And the best I'd say is I think we'll do our level best to get it at least by this October timeline. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll hit that and we'll address it.
I would suggest that when there is a draft prepared to go before the Chugach Electric Board, that we should consider that's a reasonable time when we would have a copy of that as well. And so I don't think that's unrealistic or out of line, but we can talk about that more in the October meeting when we get there. And for the record, Mr. Weddleton did arrive, and Ms. Nabosky, you wanted to?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Just to follow up on what Mr. Dunbar was saying, isn't it appropriate, though, for the Assembly to engage in executive sessions when it comes to litigation, or when it comes to potential litigation, or potential, like, we're talking a lot of money here. So even if it's not to bring issues, like constituent issues, I think an executive session might be an appropriate place to talk about the potential deal or potential structure of the deal, because the Assembly might have concerns with a legal avenue that the administration is taking.
Yeah, through the chair, if there was a litigation angle or some kind of direction to be given to the attorney, we could certainly do an executive session on that front.
And just, in my mind, I think I know how this goes, but I just want to ask you specifically, as you're crafting the 2019 budget, considering this deal in mind, how do you see this impacting the 2019 budget?
Through the chair, the 2019 budget is going to assume it's not happening, because we could build a budget that says it's definitely happening in September, and then all the financial transactions that are triggered as a result of that flow into the budget in some way. But until it's real, it's not real, and so we're not going to build a castle in the sky. The 2019 budget will assume that it doesn't happen, and when it does, we can do supplementals or changes, but it's not going to be part of that conversation.
Okay, so to follow up on that, specifically the staff or different expenditures that are going to be assumed in the 2019 budget, I think it's probably the more cautious route to assume it doesn't happen until it happens. But realistically, I'm very skeptical, unlike maybe others, but I'm very skeptical that we'll see an adjustment made in the first quarter, or that will actually take down those positions. Is that what you guys are planning on doing if that happens? Is my skepticism unfounded?
Well, I guess I need to get a little bit more clarity into this skepticism. So you're wondering when we will pass a budget that says MLP is now winked out of existence and the FTEs that are associated with the MLP no longer live here. I think we would have to do that as part of the close, sometime near the closing. So after we are already through, the assembly's approved, Chugach is approved, the RCA has approved, then it really is real, and then there's a cleanup action that has to happen at OMB.
Okay.
If I might, then, isn't the closing period like 15 months? I heard, what's the number? How far out are we projecting the final closing date on the deal?
I think right now we've been thinking September 2019,
Okay,
because
so 15 months.
if the Assembly and Chugach Board approve by the end of the year, it goes to the RCA. This is in the category of sort of the catch-all others, which has a 6-month, plus they can extend for a little bit further, and so we're giving the RCA sort of maximum time. That's the number that we've been talking about.
So, Mr. Training?
Nothing.
No.
Yeah.
Any other
Amy
questions?
picked it up.
You guys stopped.
I know, Eric,
So,
you're next.
If,
You better start thinking like me.
if we do have to choose a sacrifice, it's going to be Mr. Paulson. So, we'll do it from there. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on the MLP Chugach Electric concern other than well, we have the resolution, I'm sorry, now we have just 7 minutes. The resolution before you acknowledges and supports the October 24th purchase agreement timeline set forth by the Chugach Board for its intended acquisition, the MLP, and expressing thanks. The agreement, and I don't know how my staff actually changed this.
There's 3 of them.
Yeah, no, there's 3 at least, 1 in the title. I'm super embarrassed about that. Dean drafted part of it, and my staff drafted part of it.
So we're blaming the spelling on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all my fault. Anyhow, that's embarrassing, but the resolution came to us dated 18 June. We have to check and verify these numbers before it's completely. The receipt of information from the meeting, the timeline completed the purchase on April 3rd. 65% of those voting in the municipal election approved the transaction. Ordinance is approved by the Assembly by December 31st, ensuring the parties are engaged in due diligence. Whereas it's expected to produce more efficient operations, etc. If approved by the Assembly, the process would be reviewed by RCA. The Assembly resolves that the Assembly has received the resolution, approves the timeline, and is effective on passage. So this is basically just a statement acknowledging that they communicated to us and that we are communicating back to them and ready to go. And so, with a few corrections, this will be introduced for the agenda. The next meeting.
Can I ask a question? What is the point of this? Is this just to like put on the record and just remind the public that this is happening and this is the timeline? Is it just to reinforce that?
Both to the public and to Chugach.
You'll get it. You'll get it.
I've never done this
I have
before.
faith in you.
This has just been planted in my head. I know the difference. But the point is to communicate to them as well that we are here, we're paying attention, and we're ready to go. So it's to the public, to all the parties.
Okay.
It doesn't have any net effect.
Most resolutions.
It's confidential. All right?
You done?
Done.
Let's move on to confirmation hearings. We have a confirmation here for the Merrill Field Director. Ralph, come and sit at the table with us.
Felt like I was at the little kids'
Please.
table.
Yeah.
I get to move up.
Not a problem. And we're getting your resume now. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll have questions from the Assembly members. This is pretty harmless, unlike D.C. You're fine. We are going to the FBI investigate you. Let me tell you that.
I think they've already done that, haven't they? Well, thank you for having me here. Again, as you know, my name is Ralph Gibbs. I guess in the context of what is my claim to fame to be here, what qualifies me to be here, I spent over 20 years in Marine Corps aviation. One of those assignments was as the executive officer for the Marine Corps Air Station in Futenma, Okinawa. It originally was called Fatima, and our hosts asked us to pronounce it differently. So, Air Station exec, and a Marine Corps Air Station is much like any other airport. It's a small city, as you know. I flew gunship helicopters, Cobras. I flew OV-10 Broncos, which is a twin-engine observation aircraft. I flew King Airs. I flew as a flight instructor in the Naval Aviation Training Command. I was the comptroller for the Marine Forces in the Pacific. Had a $500 million budget to make sure that we obligated and followed all the fiduciary procedures to keep us out of jail, or me out of jail, I guess. When I left the Marine Corps, I went into academics, and I've been an aviation academic since. I was the deputy director for the Central Oregon Community College Aviation Program. I was offered a job to become the director and chief flight instructor for Eastern Kentucky University. And then I received an offer to come to Alaska, and my wife and I do like snow and mountains and such things, to be the director. I will say that in that background, I come from an aviation paradigm that embraces structure. And by that I mean I have encountered flight schools that are not so structured, not like the military, not like the airlines. And so in each of the assignments that I have had, I have worked on bringing about organizational transformation towards structure, towards observance of the rules and regulations. I will tell you candidly, it took me 5 years to pull that off in Kentucky. I've been focused on the flight training for the university for the last 2 years, and I think I just barely hit self-sustaining RPM, as they say in the turbine world. So that's the context of why I'm here, and I guess also I do acknowledge that at the airport, as in all organizations, there are many stakeholders, and they all have a different concern, a different perspective to be mindful of.
How many years do you have in active duty?
26.
Okay. Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gibbs, it's good to meet you, and I always love it when we have military veterans among us. I want to ask you a couple questions about your organizational leadership specific to airport operations. Talk to me a little bit about the military, the bases that you, the commands that you had specific to their airport operations, the similarities and differences you see as they apply to Merrill Field.
Well, first I would like to say, if you'll allow me some humor, there are those at the university who have insisted that they think I'm trying to convert the program there into a little miniature Marine Corps squadron.
Nothing wrong with that. No.
And I'm not. I'm truly not. I've been out of the Marine Corps as long as I was in. I've been in academics as long as I was in. But I do believe that organizations are organizations, whether they're military, whether they're civilian, whether they are Department of Defense, whether they are church. An organization is an organization, and some of the and people are people, and so the things that work to inspire people to work at higher levels of performance, those same kinds of I guess techniques work everywhere. But I do, let me just follow up with a caveat. I like to get people to work well together. Conflict does not accomplish anything. I had an employee tell me about a year ago that he believed that conflict was the way that we got things going, got things improved, and I just fundamentally disagree. So I hope that answers your question.
Not really, but that's okay.
Well, follow up then.
I'll follow up. So specifically, when I'm looking at military operations and I'm looking at Merrill Field operations, I mean, when you're logistically, you're going to be responsible for leases, and you're going to be responsible for,
Snow removal?
up, the grounds and maintenance and all kinds of different contracts. I know some of that trickles over into the military, where there's different kinds of contracts and stuff you have to manage, but from a logistical functional standpoint, how do you see Merrill Field and the military, that the bases, when I keep saying bases, I mean airfields. How do you see those similar and different?
Well,
I'm trying to leverage your experience to understand how it translates to the civilian Merrill Field. And I personally put great value into, I love regiment and structure, and I love the military. I mean, if the military rules the civilian world, I think it makes a little more streamlined, but
I guess I would offer that my time as a comptroller, working on contracts, working on budgets, making sure that obligation rates, of course, in the military, you use it or you lose it, so it's a little bit different. But there's still a budget process that's behind everything that we do at a non-military airport, and so that financial piece is the same. And I guess I haven't been there to see what is my budget. How do I expend those funds to pay for improvements outside of those dollars that come in from the FAA?
well, those are good questions, and I look forward to next year coming back and actually not next year, in a couple months, we'll be talking about your budget, and we'll be asking you the same questions, I'm sure, but I love the fact that you have that fiscal look ahead, so I appreciate it.
Any questions for some members?
Yeah, so I have a slate.
I know, you got a whole page. John, I'm going to save you to the end.
It's my first time at this committee, by the way.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, welcome. So, you know, it seems like a big part of running Merrill Field is knowing how to get federal money to do stuff there.
Yes.
And you would do that in the military. Are you familiar with all the pockets of money from the federal government, how to get it?
So my
More
fiscal...
than our fair share.
Yes. I had to go after blue dollars and green dollars. And yes, they're different than FAA dollars, but it's still the federal government, and it's still a budgetary process. It's still a bureaucracy about identifying your needs and then making sure that you obligate the funds that they gave you based on what you said that you would need. And so I think the process is the same. It's just a different color of money.
Yeah, I have
John?
a question. So, I mean, so you're still relatively new. Is there someone on staff there who handles
Yes.
federal funding, and they know that stuff, and you're their supervisor? Is that right? Okay.
Anything else, John?
No, thank you.
Forrest, anything from you?
Well, I guess it's sort of going to Ms. Domboski's questions actually about your military experience. Because unless I'm misreading your resume here, it seems like you have directed a lot of flight training programs, but it doesn't seem like you've actually done any operations of airfields. Am I misreading this? Is there something in here that you did have direct?
So I spent 3 years as the air station in Okinawa,
Right.
as the exec. So that's my air station airport management experience. But yes, in the percentile, that's smaller than flight operations or flight instruction or flight academics.
Right. Well, I'm just to follow up on that. I think I agree with Ms. Domboski. I don't think that is, to me, 3 years managing was probably a much larger in terms of volume than Merrill Field. I think if you were to take over, Ted Stevens International Airport right now, that might be a little bit challenging. But Merrill Field is a much smaller operation, and you have a very impressive resume otherwise. So I have no concerns there. I was just curious if you could elaborate a little bit. Thank you.
Hopefully you'll find me a quick study.
Austin, anything from you, man? Okay. Before I get on to him, because he's got a whole page. Have you been to the facility you're going to manage? Do you know that's built in our city dump?
Yes.
Consequently, you got methane coming up.
Yes.
Have you looked at how they're dealing with the methane? Corruption's coming up there. The landfill we have now, they've planned for the methane, they're harvesting it. But there, it comes up. So my question is, have you looked at the methane coming up there and figured out how you're going to deal with it?
Of all the things that have been brought to my attention, that wasn't one of them.
Okay, well, you need to look at it.
Yes,
is,
sir.
For years, that was our city dump. And we dumped a lot of things there that are now percolating up. So, and the other question for you deals with helicopters. Being a helicopter pilot, most complaints we get are helicopters coming in. So that's one thing you have to deal with. And you've got the background on dealing with helicopters. So
I need to talk with the tower and all the pilots, all the stakeholders, watching the departure of the helicopters. It's very close to the arrival on the airplanes, and in all of the air station operations I'm familiar with, where we're combining helicopters and airplane ops, there are ways to deconflict. What I have observed, those rules, those processes have not been observed. And so I just need some time, though, to see why they're doing it the way they're doing it and why they're departing, how they're departing.
Okay. Chris,
Okay, two things.
the balance of the meeting is yours.
Yeah,
He said two. I heard him.
two things. First, I would like
Page
to
one.
hear questions or thoughts from the advisory commission, if there are any.
Not at this time, but maybe you can come back to us.
Okay, and then instead of actually having you answer these questions, which are lengthy and will be asked of you by the Fairview Community Council, because that's who generated all these questions, I think that if you step back from the list of questions and kind of think about what are they all about, they're all about the interaction between such a utility or an enterprise with where people live and work. And so in the past, there have been good relations and there have been not good relations between the management of Merrifield and the neighborhoods. And in fact, Fairview is the neighborhood. I think there have been some 7 fatal crashes where airplanes have plummeted through people's roofs, into homes and have proved very shocking to people. And so the kernel of the question is, how do you intend, or what do you see as the opportunities to work together with the local community, the very hyper-local community that has to deal with the impacts of airplanes flying out of pattern all the time,
Well, number one, as I've already done, I need to make myself available to hear all the concerns. With the advisory committee at the airport, I need to hear the rest of the story. I need to have everyone's input to see if I can divine or even just be a facilitator to come up with decisions that will be win-win for everybody. It is not lost on me that general aviation is critical to the state of Alaska. So I believe we need to find a way to accommodate those operations. There's almost 1,000 aircraft. On the other hand, we have residents that are threatened, whether that's by noise pollution or whether that's by the fear of airplanes falling out of the sky. So I am just one person, but I do believe inch by inch, anything's a cinch, and just start gathering all the input, getting the synergy of folks working together to try to find solutions that meet the needs of everyone, and then step off. Chris?
So, the one issue that I have heard over time, other than the kind of daily operational issues, is number 7 on your list here, and that has to do with liability insurance coverage. And that's kind of a radical thought, right?
It's inconceivable to me that someone would fly without insurance. So I need to look into that.
All right. I think I'm good. And my bias is I love aviation. I love where it fits. I lived under the flight path for Merrifield for 15 years and then moved under Jaber. And so I don't mind airplanes at all.
Ralph, one thing I might suggest you do is get with the community council and start to attend their meetings. They usually meet once a month. It would be good to have somebody that they know rather than just when they've got a problem, they call you. If they see you sitting there at the community council meetings, that'll help tremendously.
For Fairview.
For Fairview, yes.
Yes, sir.
Forrest?
Yeah, so I was kind of to you, Chris, but also to you. So your confirmation, is it on our coming agenda or the following?
Right now, we don't have anything on the assembly agenda, but the plan was to add it to the addendum for next week.
So you had mentioned about the community council. Will we have actually time to get the community council before we confirm it?
No. And I was in discussion with the administration, with Ona, about that. And I don't know that you've actually started the job yet, right?
Not till Monday.
Right, and so functionally it wasn't proper to have them go at the last meeting, and so, which was last week. And so, I think though, and I don't mean to speak against Fairview, Fairview has a person here who wears 2 hats. And they are well aware, and they submitted all these questions, and so, but they've also been committed that he'll be there at the next meeting in October.
Yeah.
And
But at that point, he might already be confirmed.
very likely will already be confirmed. Yeah.
If you're comfortable with that and they're comfortable with that, then I'm fine with that. Just know that, if
Go ahead,
he
ma'am.
if he answers this in a way that is fully unacceptable to Fairview, and we've already confirmed him, and there, you know, there's not a lot of leverage we have, even if we didn't want to do it.
Which raises a question, but we'll get to it at the end.
Unless she's got her comment, ma'am.
Oh, okay, the other hat I'm wearing is treasurer of the Fairview Christian Council, and I think this,
Mr. Chair,
Ma'am.
Assembly members, we've had some problems with the recording, so I'm sorry, Sharon, could you please come and stand here and say your name clearly for the record so that we make sure that...
Sharon, how about you sit in that chair there rather than stand?
It says reserved.
The one there.
It's reserved for you.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, reservations.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just for the record, I'm Sharon Shamar, last name spelled C-H-A-M-A-R-D. I'm a vice chair of the Municipal Airport Aviation Advisory Commission, but also the treasurer of the Fairview Community Council. So sort of here representing both bodies in a sense. And to the question of timing, you know, we don't have our next executive board meeting or general membership meeting until October. But I do think that whoever is the next airport manager is such an important thing for Fairview that, you know, I think that we could rustle up some members of the executive board who would meet with Mr. Gibbs to address some of these questions, just to see what he. We're very eager to sort of reset the relationship between the airport and the neighborhood because it's been very poor over the last few years.
Yeah.
So just a quick question then.
Go ahead.
Mr. Gibbs, by Tuesday, do you think you'd be able to sit down for some time with the committee of the executive board of the Fairview Community Council?
Yes, I'd like to know why the words poor were used, so I know specifically what my predecessor did or did not do, or what the issues were. So
Sharon, he doesn't have the background coming from War 48, so you'll need to educate him on the
Chris,
conflicts you've had.
it might not have to be by Tuesday because it's not on our agenda yet. I think I would prefer this be on a regular agenda the following meeting rather than lay them on the table. If you're comfortable with that.
Well, we're happy to do whatever the
So
assembly
we
would
can
like.
serve in an interim capacity for a while.
Right, and the thinking was that we'd put it on the addendum only so that his resume's out in the public domain and everybody knows who he is. If you guys don't want to act on it on Tuesday, you're free to push
I
it
think
to
it's a
another
good idea
meeting.
to postpone it for.
That's good.
There's no real need because he's acting, and that's fine. He's got all the authority he needs. He's acting.
So I think what we'll do is we'll put it on the agenda so that his resume's out in the universe, and then we'll
Okay.
anticipate that it'll be delayed.
And Ralph, if you'd get with Sharon and the E-board there, that way, because you don't have any history, and you need to understand the problems we've had with neighbors in Merrill-Field.
So the next,
I told you before we were talking about helicopter noise. That's a big problem they've got.
Mr. Chair, the next Fairview
Sure.
Executive Board is the 4th of October. And
Okay.
so that would fit because the next assembly meeting is the 11th.
Yeah, that would. Amy?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm probably one of the more persistent assembly members when it comes to really looking at people's resume and seeing what, you know, if they're qualified or not, in my view, which is not everybody else's view, but just looking at your history, Mr. Gibbs, and looking at your experience, I'm impressed. I don't say that often, ask anybody, but the thing that really has, you really sold me on your appointment is I've listened to how you're answering these questions being given to you, and I like the fact that you're inquisitive, and I like the fact that you're trying to get all the information, and not just trying to placate assembly members and give them some touchy-feely answer. So from that perspective, I think that's exactly what we need in a director. We need somebody who isn't just blinded to their agenda, but rather they're inquisitive and they want to get facts and they want to, come up with a solution. I know you said you'd like to come up with solutions for win-win. I don't know that that always works because I want safety first, especially when it comes to our airport operations. So sometimes people aren't going to be happy with your decision, and that will be fine with me if safety is number one. So I just put that out in the realm, but I understand where you were coming from. If you can get a win-win for everybody, great. But I don't think that win-win should be at the cost of safety for airport operations. But again, I'm a little bit more direct than some, but I do plan on voting for your confirmation. I don't generally say that ahead of time, but looking at your resume and the way you've presented yourself, I have great confidence that the administration has picked a qualified and able candidate. So
Thank you.
I look forward to working with you.
Anything else from assembly members? I don't think you're ever not a Marine.
Okay.
Should we talk about that later?
Yes, sir.
You always are. Okay, moving on down. Unfinished agenda business, there is none. How's participation? Does anybody would like to address the assembly on this issue? Come on, you've been waiting here for how long now? 45 minutes standing there? You got something to say? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. We can make a clock. My name is Eugene Carhaven. I represent myself, follow the public process. The public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body is more like a public interest. My comments are focused on the first item on the agenda dealing with the cell MLNP. I appreciate Assemblymember Dunbar and also Assemblymember Constant in their going over the process and how you're going to review the matter and have the public connected. As I address concerns about fast track, I appreciate the way you were discussing it here at this meeting. I'm still confused with respect about this time frame. I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I do make mistakes too, there's some deadline of December 31st for you to act on it. When I say you, the Assembly. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and then if that's correct, I'm worried about this narrow window. I was assured by Assembly members at the previous time on utilities, when this was brought up in the meeting committee, that you will have time for the public to be connected. But what I'm witnessing, and I want to be brief and on target here, is that my understanding this has been an ongoing negotiation between the city and Shugash on the proposed agreement will happen, and then it will go to you, and the public will see it. But what I'm worried about is this timeline, and will there be really enough time for the public and you to address it? And with the frightening situation, and when I say frightening, of this kind of December 31st deadline and this narrow window before you even see it or the public sees it, and a chance for you to address it and the public address it. I remind you of my words I've said in the past from time to time. The more complicated an issue is and complex, the more notice, the more opportunity comes to be heard. And I believe this one really goes on track to my concern and the schedule. And I'm alerting you right now is I'm receiving the schedule and I'm worried about this connection with the public. And I would encourage you to at least have a minimum of 2 public hearings on this proposal, on this agreement. And then last part, and just to close with this, all related, is that a copy of the agreement that you're going to have should be fully available to the public so they can see it, not something laid on the table or addendum to the agenda, which really narrows the window. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene. Any questions from some members? Thank you. Anybody else wish to address us on this issue? Seeing no one, this meeting's over. Thanks for being here.